welcome to the third and the final part of this illustration. This is where the crucial decisions will be made. So, carrying on with the illustration, I am now trying to get the eyeshadows pop even further. I'm using this fluorescent color, which I think is a neon. It's Neon Yellow Fluorescent by Molotow acrylic paint pen or paint marker, and I think I ended up building it up twice later on, so again I messed up the perfectly black and sharp eyeliner, so I'll have to go back in later and correct that. But basically that neon color just made it look a little bit more highlighted. Back onto working with those three pencils and just adding a little by little more shadowing, more depth, and it really does help to create a face illustration that has kind of a character. When you start just with a base color, it all looks flat and uninspiring, but the key, this is actually what I learned. You may have maybe you have a different view of this, but I have learned that illustrations is the color. So if you have a great color palette, that will be very, very useful to make a good illustration, and B, it's the shadowing. Whether you use purely watercolors, whether you use purely pencils, or you mix and match for a nice mixed media illustration, it has to be all well balanced, and it has to be a great play of pushing certain areas back and bringing certain areas out, and that balance of contrast is what makes a good illustration. Highlighting a little bit of the face there as well. Here I will be making a little mistake. In the Cupid's bone, typically you should put a lighter color, maybe even something shimmery. Actually, this is where those Finetech watercolors would come in handy, those that have a white background and just the sheen that changes slightly. So the Cupid's bow would look really cute in that, but instead I decided to put a darker color and then also under the lip to, I guess, to push it back, but it ended up looking almost like a moustache, so that wasn't a good decision, and I will also rectify that later. Here I'm going over the eyeliner and making it sharp again, just a little correction. Whatever you do with the eyeshadows, you always should go back to the eyeliner and finish with that, because even if you're working with pencils and not acrylic paints, markers, or even just out of tube paint, even the pencils can layer slightly over the black marker and make it look a lot less sharp, even though it's such a slight difference. So here I'm testing a lovely color. I think this is Lobster, and it's such a fantastic color for freckles, and of course having a ginger color palette going here, the freckles were a must. I find freckles super adorable on face, and it creates again just an extra detail that makes it look very, very cute and textural. I don't like face to be just flat and perfect. I think certain imperfections actually make it for a more interesting facial look. So here I tried to rectify that darkness that I put in the Cupid's bow and the under the lip, but it just sort of, it was hard now to go over the dark very pastel pencil. So even trying to go with a lighter still didn't work because that pencil was quite dark and I did put quite a bit of it. So for now I'm leaving it, going back to the brows just a touch. And for the shadowing, actually, I think, no, it's not the brows, it's the shadowing around the eyes, just putting a little bit more, pushing back that area above the eye, below the eyebrow, trying to get some more dimension in there. And I recommend with this trio of pencils to basically, did I mention it? I think I mentioned it in part 2, so I'll remind you. It's the terracotta, the Mars orange and light sienna in the Derwent Drawing Pencils. So that trio, I recommend to start with the darkest color and quite lightly, because you always have time to build it up to darker if you want, but it's a lot harder to go back to lightening it if you realize it was a bit much. So work light-handed. Okay, so now we are doing, I think I picked again lobster, yeah, the same color as I did the freckles, and I'm just bringing in a few lashes, just couple, having that twiggy kind of look going, just a few lashes underneath the eye, few thick lashes above the eye, well there you go, in the lash area, and that also widens the eye, makes it more open, makes it more doll-like. If you remember that iconic photograph of Twiggy and those eyelashes, her eyes looked huge. It's just a makeup trick in the fashion world that you do for tutorials. So there you go, having loads of fun. You'll see me go back to those pencils. Even though I feel like I'm finished, I still find a little area where I could do a bit more shadowing, a bit more dimension, bringing in things, pushing things back, and I'll do it until it feels complete. So at this point, I am starting to consider I like the other orientation more. And like I mentioned in the part 2, with the sitting down zombie-like posture, that hair just looked a little bit weird, because it's almost like a magnet pulling her, including the hair. I mean, it could be like a fun, you know, funny kind of connotation on the zombie posture, but I decided that a big messy bun would be a better option, because then we have the upper body, the neck and the head and the bun pulling her up. So from the waist up, it's a nice tall posture with a straight back, and I thought having the plaits going to the left was a little bit of a distraction, where the eye kind of didn't focus on the face as much, but kind of was curious about those plaits. So I didn't want that to happen. I wanted the eye to be around her face and her head and everything, and her hair to be all in one kind of focal point. So there I am using that bun stamping element from the FOTD set, and I will use the same marker, the Uni Posca bronze, to color in that lovely bun. The color goes on really easily. It's a good nib to do areas that are slightly bigger, but also if you want to detail, the same nib goes a long way. So it's the PC3M. I have to try the gold in this nib. The gold typically I use is the PC1MR, which is very temperamental. It doesn't deposit as much metallic paint. Sometimes it goes into transparency, and yeah, it's a moody one. So here we go, and I like it so much better. I love both hairstyles, you know, either that or the previous one. but now it kind of becomes obvious to me that if I take those plaits away, it's right on point and exactly looks how I want it to look. So don't be afraid if you already made a decision about something. It could be hair, it could be an outfit. There are usually ways to correct things and work with them, but that will mean that you'll have to find a way to do it. And in my case, it will be bringing in quite a dramatic color, but you'll see. I guess you already saw it from the thumbnail. So what's the secret? I will be using black acrylic paint to basically, you know, take away all that mess from the pencil and the hair and everything that I don't want. It will be just, you know, blocked out. Here are the shoes, they look lovely. Love bringing two colors together, so if it's the hair, then maybe repeating the color, or if it's, sometimes I repeat the outfit and the lip, I like that as well. Just kind of pulling the color into two directions, and here we're kind of starting with her feet and finishing with her hair, so I like that as well. And just again going back and forth between those three colors, and you probably can see I'm not pressing that much now. It's a very light touch because it's the finishing touches. So here I'm attempting to do something around the lips still, but very soon I will realize that I need something heavier. And what's heavier when you're working with watercolor or pencils and you need something to correct? You can see that bit of darkness there. It looks a bit odd over her lip. So acrylic paint, that of course covers anything you want. Any mistake you would have done, covers it beautifully. So that's what I will do. Now, using acrylic paint from a tube in such a small area would be quite difficult, although possible if you have a very tiny brush. But what I find quite useful in this type of situation is a marker. Acrylic paint markers are fantastic for going into tiny areas. So let's see, here we go. Uni Posca comes to the rescue, and the color, oh, I think I already put it away. I think it was a red one. There is a dark red, which is not the one I'm using there. It's just a red. Their color names are usually quite basic. But yeah, so it's a red, and you can see it will be solid. I'm covering those areas that were dark, and therefore making the lips even plumper than they originally were. I already illustrated them quite plump, but this is exaggerating them even that bit further, and look at it now. Gorgeous. So that darkness really didn't need any it didn't need to be there. It didn't bring any purpose really. I was hoping to create a bit of depth there, but just doesn't work. So I think next time I'll try the light metallic kind of pearlescent paint for the Cupid's bow, which is actually what you would do in makeup industry. You would basically do that, and you would also put it on the bridge of your nose and around the height of your cheekbones, a little bit on your temples maybe. So that's something to try. Actually, I did do that with eyes as well. Once I layered it over the grey eyes, and that made the eyes actually look almost like they're alive, because they would have that sheen once you turn the paper a bit. So that's another thing you can try, and it would be actually great to do it with a pearlescent color that has no base color, but once the light hits it, it has that like green or blue sheen to it. That would look amazing in a zombie illustration, so highly recommend. Okay, a bit of detail, and again trying to rescue that messy black ink running into watercolor situation. I'm just adding Uni Posca black marks there to her outfit, and also finishing her bottom part with a bit of tiny dots to bring it in, and also to contrast the outfit from the leg, an extra detail wooden illustrating that you can always, every little bit of detail always helps when it comes to illustration. So if you think you can add a little bit of something, even here in the shoe's tiny, but I did go over with the black just to create lines separating the heel, separating, you know, different parts, the platform of the shoe, and it really just does help. So always consider where you can add more detail. So here I thought I can add a bit of flowers. Now, honestly speaking, I'm not sure if I love the flowers, I have to say. Even in the end result, I think maybe just leaving it plain and, I don't know, just doing a basic black string there at the bottom of it or something. I don't know. I generally don't like to over detail the hair situation, but I thought since I'm gonna, I think already at that point I made a decision that the plaits will be going, so I thought maybe I'll bring a little bit of extra detail elsewhere in the hair, and so the flowers were the best bet in my mind at that point. So I'm bringing that same red color, creating 3 flowers, and then in the middle black, and that looked awful in my mind. In my view, I didn't like that trio. It kind of looked, I don't know, didn't work well. So then I thought, how can I rescue? So I started adding a few more doodling marks to it, and then eventually I'll bring in more flowers and make it like a little floral crown. Maybe if I went for different floral shapes, I'm thinking maybe, or maybe because it was already beautiful and metallic and this sort of strawberry blonde color, that it was enough. Maybe it didn't need that. So yeah, it's one of those things that sometimes you think it needs something, but then very quickly it can get into too much. So here I'm pulling out my Finetech metallic watercolors, and I will add a generous saturated little dot of that color in a while. But now I just showed you that outline of the stamp for the hip element, which you can still see at this point, while I'm letting that water drop sit at the on top of the Finetech color, because when you want it really saturated, let it sit until the water almost dries out, and then you'll have the thick mixture there. So you go in with your brush and it will be super thick. So if you wanted gold to be like liquid gold, that's a trick to do. Okay, basically less water is what it is. So moving on to the leg, what I'm doing there is just bringing in exactly what we did before, but bringing it in even further. So I'm pulling all those colors down. Sorry, I have been doing this voiceover in one go, so it's I've been chatting for quite a while now. Yeah, so the dark color, I'm building on that, taking it further down and further down, all the blending as well, right up to the lines where the stamping image is, so that I use it as a highlight. Wherever that image is, that's now has become highlight, and everything around is where I actually added more volume to the tie. So that's when I'm adding all the blending and the darkness, and it will look a lot better. You will not really see it, it will be hardly visible. If you know it's there, you'll start looking and possibly see a very faint line, but other than that, if you don't know it, you wouldn't even kind of look in there or find it. It's not very obvious at all. And if you wanted to go even further, then just bring the darker colors down even more to cover it completely. So here we go. Now the watercolor is nice and thick, and I'm just adding gold details to the flowers, and still not loving it. So I think very soon I will start adding more flowers and more detail, and also to bring it in and blend it more into the hair, because at the moment you can see it sort of looks like it's the flowers are there, the hair is there, it's not really connecting. So to connect it and make it blend in a little bit more, I will use I think the bronze, is it the bronze again? Yeah, so I'll use the same bronze marker to create these tiny daisy-like petals on top of the flowers, and that will A, blend it in a bit more, and B, make it more detailed. I think I am happy with the way it is. Well, if I could have it without the floral crown, probably I would prefer it, but the end result is much better than what you're seeing here right now. So it's one of those things. If you really hated it, you could just take the acrylic paint again, the marker, go over it and try to cover it. Even though it's black, it just means you'll have to do it maybe 2 or 3 times, and it's that opaque that it would cover it. Quite often that's what I do in my doodly abstract work. In fact, I've been working on something the last couple of days where I've been going over the same area probably 4 times, kind of feeling like I'm improving each time, and then I'm still not fully satisfied with it, so I go back and just go to acrylic paint. That's the best way. And if it doesn't cover it in one layer, again another layer and another layer, and it will get there. So here I am adding the petals for the flowers, and now you can see it looks nice in the sense that it's not just black or dark red. It sort of blends in. It looks quite pretty actually. Definitely better than it was before, but do let me know actually, do you prefer the hair on its own or with the flower crown? Alright, so here I am going in with black acrylic paint. The matter your acrylic paint is, the better for this type of look. You don't want it anything too glossy because we worked with everything matte so far. You don't want it to be like reflecting light as you're trying to look at the illustration. And the blackness is a good idea if, for example, you wanted to write something on the black. So you could use some chalk. I think there's some chalk, black chalk paints that you could do, and then use a white jelly roll or something to write over it if you wanted to create a card, or if you wanted to do like a journal, bit of writing there, you could do that, or just leave it black. Again, complete darkness goes with the theme of the Halloween. I quite liked it. So with the larger areas I used a flat brush, which you can't see here, and then I'm just showing you how I am working around the smaller areas there. So I'm using a fine tipped brush, and I think the one I have there is like a Cat's Tang, the silver line by Jackson's. It's very good for these small areas, and basically very slowly without making any sudden movements, because this is black acrylic paint. Once if you mess it up, if you go over your illustration, that's it, you can't go back from there. So very, very slowly, tiny little strokes, and I'm basically taking away everything that I want, that I don't want to see, and boom, here it is. It is finished. And honestly, I love it in this rotation. So when she's sitting down and she has that zombie look in her eyes, in her face, slightly open lips, and the arms. But here's the original. This is how I was kind of planning it to begin with. Still works okay, although face wise, personally, I prefer this way. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you're thinking of using that for Halloween inspired postcards, or just a fun illustration in your journals, sketchbooks. And I will see you next time for another doll illustration. See you soon.